There are towns in Arizona that Google Maps barely admits exist, and the people living in them would very much like to keep it that way. This is a countdown of the 12 corners of Arizona where you can own a home, see actual stars at night, and go an entire afternoon without hearing another human being. Places built for anyone who looked at Phoenix traffic and quietly whispered, "No." We're talking about a town named after a poker hand, a high school football stadium that is a giant pink dome you can spot from the sky, a former copper city where the dead outnumber the living, and the Grand Hotel is haunted on purpose, and a village of 800 people whose most famous resident is a pizza called the Velvet Elvis. Subscribe now, or I'm giving your spot to a Californian with a U-Haul and a dream. Let's count it down. Before we start, one thing you need to understand, because it explains this entire video. Arizona feels crowded, but that is a lie your GPS tells you while you sit in traffic on the 101. In reality, only about 17% of this entire state can even be privately owned. The rest is national forest, federal desert, state trust land, and tribal reservation. Almost everyone gets funneled into one metro, Phoenix, which added over 57,000 people in a single recent year. That was the third biggest one-year county jump in the entire country. And in 2024, Phoenix set a record so bleak it belongs in a horror movie, 113 straight days above 100 degrees. The old record was 76. They shattered it and kept going for over a month straight. Imagine explaining that to your electricity bill. Now here is the part the moving companies do not advertise. The crowding is only going to get worse. Projections have Metro Phoenix holding nearly 3/4 of the state's entire population within a few decades, while counties out in the mountains and the high desert are actually shrinking. So the quiet towns are not a myth. They are real, they are emptying out in some cases, and they are fenced in by 12 million acres of nothing. Today we are climbing that fence, 12 times. Number 12. Ajo, way down in the southwest corner of the state, about 40 miles from the Mexican border and 2 hours from the nearest anything, sits a town that looks like a Spanish colonial daydream someone abandoned in the desert. Ajo has around 3,700 year-round residents, a palm-lined central plaza, white archways, and a grand old schoolhouse called the Curly School. Here's the strange part. None of this grew naturally. Ajo was a company town built on purpose around Arizona's very first open-pit copper mine, designed by architects imported all the way from Minnesota to make a rough mining camp look like a graceful European piazza, palm trees and all. Then in 1985, after a long and bitter strike, the new Cornelia mine closed and the company left. And the town, instead of dying like most company towns do, did something wonderful. Artists moved in, bought the abandoned mining houses for pocket change, and a nonprofit turned the old Curly School into affordable studios and living space. Now murals cover the walls. It is a genuinely tricultural community of Anglo, Hispanic, and Tohono O'odham families. And the dark skies over Ajo are so clean that stargazers drive in from 3 states just to look up. The catch, and there is always a catch, is the heat. Ajo sits low in the Sonoran Desert, and locals literally joke that it is where summer spends the winter. July will remind you of your mortality. The population also swells by several thousand snowbirds every winter, and the Border Patrol station has become one of the biggest employers in town, which tells you something about where you are. But if you want murals, silence, some of the cheapest real estate in the state, and a border town art scene wrapped in Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument, Ajo is somehow real. And if a mining town reinventing itself as a painter's colony is the kind of thing you're into, you are absolutely going to want to keep watching. Number 11. Patagonia. Roughly 1 hour southeast of Tucson, tucked into a valley between 2 mountain ranges near the border, there is a town of about 800 people, and it might be the most charming place in Arizona you have never heard of. Patagonia was named by homesick Welsh miners after the Patagonia region in South America, which tells you everything about how far from everywhere this place feels. The storefronts are painted in bright, defiant colors. There is a beloved local eatery called the Velvet Elvis. And the town sits directly on a major bird migration flyway, which means Patagonia is a globally famous bird-watching destination. People fly across oceans to stand in a preserve outside an 800-person town and look at warblers. And I say that with total respect, because whatever gets you out of the traffic is a good hobby in my book. It is artsy, it is liberal, it is quiet in a way that feels almost suspicious. The elevation, around 4,000 feet, keeps it cooler than the desert floor. Nearby, you have the Sonoita and Elgin wine country, some of the oldest vineyards in the state, so you are not entirely cut off from civilization or a decent glass of red. The town even has a Montessori school, which, for a place this size, is genuinely impressive. The downside is exactly what you would expect from a town of 800. The population is slowly shrinking. The median household income sits around $40,000. Most people rent rather than own. And if you need a hospital or an airport, you are driving an hour to Tucson to get it. There are not a lot of jobs here for young families. But for a retiree, a remote worker, or a birdwatcher with a paintbrush, Patagonia is a soft, colorful little escape hatch from the modern world. Number 10. Springerville and Eagar. Now we go to the far eastern edge of the state, up into a wide-open grassland called Round Valley, sitting at nearly 7,000 feet near the New Mexico line. Two towns share this valley, Springerville and Eagar, with a combined population of around 6,000. This is cattle ranch country, cold and huge and empty, about 4 hours from Phoenix, which is a polite way of saying Phoenix will never bother you here. This is also the gateway to the Coronado Trail, one of the most beautiful and least driven scenic byways in America. And I have to tell you about the Dome. Round Valley High School has a football stadium called the N-Sphere. It is a geodesic dome, 440 feet across, painted pink, and it is the 8th largest geodesic dome on the entire planet. It is also the only domed high school stadium anywhere on Earth. A tiny ranch town in the middle of nowhere built a structure so absurd, it doubled as an evacuation shelter during a massive wildfire. That is not a typo, by the way. There's a giant pink dome out in the grasslands, and teenagers play Friday night football inside it. The history here runs deep and a little violent, in the best Old West way. Ike Clanton, one of the survivors of the famous shootout at the OK Corral, was shot and killed near Springerville in 1887 while resisting arrest for cattle rustling. There is also Casa Malpais, an ancient archaeological pueblo right outside town. Round Valley is spacious in a way that city people forget is possible, and a big power plant nearby provides some real jobs. But be honest with yourself about the trade-offs. It is remote, healthcare and shopping are limited, and the winters are genuinely cold. The 2011 Wallow Fire, the largest wildfire in Arizona history, at over 500,000 acres, burned right up against this area and forced evacuations. Wide open and beautiful, yes. Convenient, absolutely not. Number 9. Williams. About 35 miles west of Flagstaff, sitting at nearly 6,800 feet along Old Route 66, is a town of roughly 3,600 people that around 5 million tourists pass through every single year. And here's the trick that makes Williams perfect for crowd haters. All those tourists leave. Williams is the gateway to the Grand Canyon, home of the Grand Canyon Railway that carries about 225,000 riders a year up to the South Rim. So the crowds pour in, ride the train, buy a magnet, and vanish by nightfall. The residents, all 3,000 of them, keep the pine forest and the neon-lit 6-block downtown for themselves. Think about the math for a second. A town of 3,000 people supports 42 hotels. That is not a town. That is a very well-disguised parking lot for the Grand Canyon. And the locals are perfectly happy to let the visitors foot the bill for keeping the diners open. It has a genuinely fun claim to fame, too. Williams was the very last town on all of Route 66 to be bypassed by the interstate, holding out until 1984. So it kept its diners, its vintage motels, and its old road soul, while the rest of the mother road faded into memory. Winters are cold and snowy, summers are cool, and the Kaibab National Forest wraps around the whole thing. The honest downside is that the local economy lives and dies on tourism. The railway is the biggest employer in town, and for serious medical needs, you are driving to Flagstaff. But imagine living somewhere where the crowds are literally built into a train schedule and go home every evening, leaving you the mountains and the stars. If you're enjoying this countdown so far, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach other people who are exactly one traffic jam away from moving to the woods. Number 8. Snowflake and Taylor. Up on the high plateau of Navajo County, at around 5,600 feet, sit two neighboring towns with a combined population near 10,000. And yes, one of them is named Snowflake. No, not because of the snow, and no, not because of anything you'd read in a comment section. Snowflake is named after its two founders, Erastus Snow and William Jordan Flake. Two Mormon pioneers, last names Snow and Flake, founded a town in 1878 and, with a completely straight face, combined them. It is the most literal town name in America, and it predates every modern joke about it by a century and a half. These are farming and ranching towns with deep pioneer roots, historic homes, a beautiful hilltop temple, and a genuinely tight-knit, conservative culture. There are some surprising modern employers, too. One of the largest is a cannabis growing operation that took over a shuttered paper mill, which is a very 2020s plot twist for a pioneer town. Taylor, meanwhile, has a fun quirk for your wallet. The town levies no property tax and never has in its entire history. It also has a 4th of July tradition where they pack an 1847 Pioneer anvil with gunpowder and blow it into the sky as a stand-in for cannon fire, which is either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. And I mean that as the highest possible compliment a person can give a small town. Life here is affordable and spacious. The trade-off is isolation. Healthcare is thin enough that people drive over to Sholo for anything serious. The culture is insular in a way that suits some people beautifully and others not at all. And this is not a place you move to for nightlife. But cheap land, no property tax in Taylor, and a 4th of July that involves explosives and an anvil. For the right person, that is paradise. Number 7. Wickenburg, 60 miles northwest of Phoenix, close enough for a Costco run but far enough to keep the sprawl out, is Wickenburg. Around 8 to 10,000 people, and it is decided, with real conviction, to remain a western town forever. It brands itself the dude ranch capital of the world, and it means it. You can still saddle up at working guest ranches like Rancho de los Caballeros and the Flying E and pretend it is 1890, right down to the campfire. The history here is pure Old West. Wickenburg is the oldest town north of Tucson, founded in 1863 around the Vulture Mine, which became the largest gold producer in Arizona history and pulled roughly $200 million of gold out of the ground over its lifetime. And because the early town had no jail, lawmen chained their outlaws to a mesquite tree right in the center of town. That tree still stands. It is called the jail tree. Their entire correctional system was for a while one very sturdy, very angry tree. Now, real talk on the numbers, because this channel does not lie to you. Wickenburg is not cheap. Median home prices have run around the mid-400,000s, above the national average, and the overall cost of living, sites above average too. The median age is up around 57, so this is a heavily retiree town, and it sits low enough that summers get genuinely hot, so this is not your heat escape option. But it is only about an hour to Sky Harbor Airport. It has real grocery stores and a hospital, a serious Western art museum, and a surprisingly fancy performing arts center for a cowboy town. If you want Western character with actual amenities, and you can stomach the price, Wickenburg delivers. Number 6. Bisbee. Now we get to my personal favorite, and it is a weird one. Way down in the far southeast near the Mexican border, a former mining city of about 4,900 people clings to the walls of a steep canyon in the Mule Mountains. Here is the surprise. Bisbee sits at 5,500 feet, so despite being in southern Arizona, it stays cooler than the desert around it. Once called the Queen of the Copper Camps, Bisbee was once one of the richest mining towns in the American Southwest, and when the mines finally closed for good, it simply refused to die. Instead, it became a bohemian artist colony, an LGBTQ-friendly haven, and one of the most delightfully strange small towns in the American West. Old miners' houses stack up the canyon walls like a Mediterranean village that got lost, connected by hundreds of public staircases. Those stairs are so central to town identity that Bisbee holds an annual race, the Bisbee 1000, where people voluntarily sprint up all of them for fun. The median age here is nearly 59, so it is an older, artsy, liberal town sitting inside a very conservative county, which creates a personality all its own. It is also the county seat, so it has real government services for a town its size. And the prices. This is one of the cheapest artsy towns in the whole state, with home values that have run well below the national median and rents that would make a city person weep with joy. For a canyon full of Victorian houses and art galleries, that is remarkable. The downsides are honest ones. The population is slowly declining, the job market is thin, poverty runs above the national average, and Tucson, 90 minutes away, is your nearest real airport. County level crime data is a little above the national average, though the picture is complicated at the town level. But if you want to buy a 100-year-old house on a staircase in a copper canyon for a fraction of what a shoebox condo costs anywhere sane, Bisbee is waiting. Quick pause. If you are the kind of person who has been mentally furniture shopping this entire video, we are the same, and you should probably just subscribe. This channel is a daily dose of the best places to live, the smartest places to retire, and the most affordable ways to quietly disappear from society. Alright, so here's where the list gets really good, because the top 5 are the towns that actually have it all. Number 5. Cottonwood. In the Verde Valley, near the geographic center of the state, sits a town of about 13,000 that has quietly figured out the ultimate Arizona life hack. Cottonwood is roughly 20 minutes from Sedona. You know Sedona, the red rock paradise that is now so overrun with tour buses and $12 smoothies that locals can barely find parking on their own street. Well, Cottonwood gets the same stunning Verde Valley scenery, the same mild climate, and the same easy access to red rock country, without the crowds and without the Sedona price tag. The greater area, including neighboring Verde Village, adds up to around 25,000 people, so you get amenities without the chaos. And it has reinvented itself into something delicious. Old Town Cottonwood is now called the Napa of Arizona, with more than a dozen wine tasting rooms you can walk between, right in a compact historic downtown. There is Dead Horse Ranch State Park, the Verde River, the ancient Tuzigoot ruins nearby, and Yavapai College even runs a viticulture program teaching people how to make the wine. Sitting around 3,300 feet, it is warmer in winter than Flagstaff and cooler in summer than Phoenix, which is the climate sweet spot most of the state can only dream about. The honest catch is that the secret is getting out. Cottonwood is growing fast, and growth is the natural enemy of quiet. There are also long-term water concerns along the Verde River that anyone buying here should take seriously before they fall in love. But right now, today, it remains a walkable wine town, with Sedona views and a regional hospital, at a price that would make a Sedona homeowner cry into their crystal collection. This is the quiet alternative to the crowded famous place, and those are almost always the smart move. Number 4. Pinetop-Lakeside. Back up into the White Mountains we go, to a town that will make you forget you are in Arizona entirely. Pinetop-Lakeside sits at nearly 7,000 feet, surrounded on all sides by the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, with a year-round population of only about 4,200. Cool pine air, actual lakes, and 4 real seasons. The town, which was formed in 1984 by merging the communities of Pinetop and Lakeside, has an official motto of "Celebrate the Seasons," which in Arizona is basically bragging. This is cabin country. The summers are gorgeous and mild, sitting comfortably in the 70s while Phoenix is busy setting new heat records, and the winters bring real, honest snow. In summer, the population can balloon past 30,000 as valley residents flee up the mountain to their second homes, which is the tell. When the wealthiest people in Phoenix want to escape the heat, this is one of the places they quietly own a cabin. You have Rainbow Lake, Woodland Lake, golf courses, the Honda Casino nearby, and forest in every single direction. The trade-offs are seasonal and serious. The economy leans heavily on that summer tourism, so steady year-round jobs are limited. And this region carries very real wildfire risk. The 2002 Rodeo Chediski fire, one of the worst in state history, forced evacuations right here, and fire is now a permanent part of mountain life in Arizona. But if your dream is a pine cabin by a lake where the summer never breaks 80 and the loudest sound all day is a woodpecker having an argument with a pine cone, Pinetop-Lakeside is the genuine alpine escape hiding inside a desert state, and almost nobody outside Arizona knows it exists. Number 3. Show Low. About 10 miles away, still up in the White Mountains at around 6,300 feet, sits a small city of roughly 12,000 people with the best town name origin story in America. And I am not exaggerating even slightly. Show Low is named after a poker game. Here is what actually happened. Two early ranchers, C.E. Cooley and Marion Clark, owned an enormous ranch together and eventually decided the area simply was not big enough for the both of them. So instead of a gunfight like reasonable men of that era, they sat down to play a card game called 7 Up to decide who would leave. As the story goes, Clark said, "If you can show low, you win." Cooley drew the deuce of clubs, the lowest possible card in the deck, won the entire settlement, and named the town after the winning move. To this very day, the main street running through Show Low is called Deuce of Clubs. An entire city exists, has a name, and has a street sign, because one man drew a 2. Beyond the legend, Show Low is one of the most livable towns on this entire list. It is a genuine regional hub, spread across 65 square miles at a density of only about 180 people per square mile, which is genuinely, deliciously empty. It has the Summit Healthcare Hospital, real shopping, an airport, and a cost of living well below the national average. 4 seasons, endless pine forest, and small city convenience all in one place. The honest notes are that the broader area carries elevated poverty. The current housing market has months of inventory sitting unsold, which is either a warning sign or a buyer's dream depending on your bank account, and the winters will close some forest roads on you. But as a place to actually live, quietly, affordably, with a poker legend baked right into your street sign, Show Low is very hard to beat. Do me a quick favor and drop a like if that Deuce of Clubs story made you smile, because that is the kind of thing this channel lives for. Number 2. Prescott. At the number 2 spot, sitting a full mile high at 5,347 feet in the central Arizona highlands, is Prescott. And this is the town for people who want to escape the crowds without escaping civilization entirely. It is larger than most towns on this list, around 40,000 people, and it anchors a cluster of communities locals called the Quad Cities. It earns its high spot by being, frankly, one of the best places to grow older in the entire country. National rankings routinely put it among America's safest and most desirable retirement towns, year after year. The climate is the whole sales pitch. Prescott gets around 300 days of sunshine, 4 genuinely mild seasons, and summer highs that rarely even crack 90 degrees, while Phoenix, 90 minutes to the south, is busy melting the soles off people's shoes. It calls itself everyone's hometown, and it absolutely looks the part, with a historic courthouse square, the famous Whiskey Row Saloon District, the Charlotte Hall Museum, and a real lived-in sense of place. As Arizona's original territorial capital, back before Phoenix was anything more than a canal and an idea. It is ringed by the Prescott National Forest, which keeps the sprawl contained and the hiking trails effectively endless. Now, this is not the cheapest option on the board. Prescott is an established, highly desirable market, so home prices run noticeably higher than the tiny towns we've covered so far. Growth is bringing more traffic than the old-timers would prefer, and the surrounding forest carries the exact same wildfire reality as everywhere else in this state. The tragic Yarnell Hill fire that took 19 firefighters happened just down the road. But if you want cool mountain air, real hospitals, colleges, a regional airport, a walkable historic core with actual restaurants, and a genuine small city feel without Phoenix's chaos, Prescott is the polished, grown-up answer. And that leaves just one. Number 1. Payson. Right in the geographic center of the state, 90 minutes from Phoenix but a full climate zone away, sits Payson. And it takes the top spot because it does the one thing this entire video is about better than anywhere else. It escapes the crowds without stranding you out in the wilderness with the coyotes. They call it the heart of Arizona, and roughly 16,000 people live there at 5,000 feet, right at the base of the dramatic Mogollon Rim. Here's the fact that makes Payson quietly magic. Around 97% of the town's boundary touches the Tonto National Forest. It is nearly surrounded by the largest continuous ponderosa pine forest on Earth, which means it physically cannot sprawl. It is boxed in by trees forever. It sits 10 to 15 degrees cooler than the valley, gets a little snow in winter that melts fast, and in summer its population nearly doubles as heat refugees pour up the hill looking for shade. The Wall Street Journal even wrote a whole piece about Phoenix families, treating this area as their well-kept secret escape. And prices have responded, with the wider Rim Country median nearly doubling in just a few years as the secret got out. And Payson is not some hamlet with a single gas station. It has a hospital, a huge modern library, a movie theater, golf, and Green Valley Park. Zane Grey, the legendary Western novelist, kept a cabin right here, and a replica anchors the local Rim Country Museum. It is a real, functional town with real services, wrapped in an unbreakable ring of pine. Funny enough, it is not even the county seat. That honor goes to Globe, over an hour to the south, which is just more proof of how comfortably remote this whole region really is. But I promised you dark honesty, so here it is, and it applies to almost every mountain town on this list, not just Payson. Wildfire risk is climbing every single year, with fire restrictions now a routine part of summer life. And the home insurance situation is the quiet crisis nobody puts on the postcard. In this region, insurance premiums that used to run a few $100s a year have jumped into the thousands, and some companies are now simply refusing to write new policies at all. The dream of the pine cabin is completely real. Just budget carefully for the fact that keeping it insured is getting harder and more expensive every year. Before we wrap, a few quick honorable mentions for the truly committed hermit. Jerome, a former mining town turned vertical, haunted ghost town of about 450 people clinging to a hillside. Pine and Strawberry, tiny cabin hamlets that hold Arizona's oldest standing schoolhouse. And Greer, sitting at over 8,400 feet, the highest town in the whole state, with one road in, one road out, and a population you could fit on a school bus. All spectacular, all arguably too small to live in unless you have truly given up on human contact, which, honestly, no judgment from me. Some days that sounds like the dream. So there they are. 12 Arizona towns where the crowds never found you, from an artist colony in the deep desert to a poker-named city up in the pines. But notice the pattern running underneath all of them. These towns stay quiet not because they got lucky, but because the map itself protects them, hemmed in tight by forest and federal land, while everyone else fights over a parking spot in Phoenix. The catch is that the very same isolation that keeps the crowds out also keeps the hospitals far away, the jobs thin, and the insurance companies extremely nervous. Quiet in Arizona is a thing you trade for. The people who move to these places happily pay that price every day. The only real question left is whether you would. If this is the kind of honest, no brochure look at where to actually live that you want more of, subscribe and stick around, because we do exactly this every single day. Drop a comment telling me which of these 12 you would genuinely move to, and be honest about it, because I can already spot the ones lying about handling that winter. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.